When I started, I found that other content creators were very stingy. They did not want to share their secrets. They did not tell you the real truth of what they did. I decided to give everything I knew away for free in little videos every single week, because if we don't tell people what works and they go try it, they'll never trust us.
Meet Graham Cochrane, 7-figure entrepreneur,
keynote speaker,
and best-selling author.
The most important asset you could have as an online entrepreneur is an audience. You don't need a big audience to make a great living, but you do need to decide who you want to serve, how you want to serve them.
Building an audience in the modern world does not mean going like full Kim Kardashian. So tell us what it does mean.
There's two lies being sold online. I think one is, the other lie is that like,
welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Potential. Jeff Lerner, your host, always so excited to be back having great conversations with great people. Today, we are joined by Graham Cochrane. He is a TEDx and keynote speaker, 7-figure entrepreneur, best-selling author of How to Get Paid for What You Know and Rebel, Find Yourself by Not Following the Crowd. He's got a top-ranked global podcast, over 80,000 listeners a month, YouTube channels with over 700,000 subs between them, and someone I've actually seen quite a bit out and about, who really, I think, stands very aligned with me of hey, there's a new economy, there's a lot of new opportunity. You don't have to settle for your grandfather's conception of employment, and you're probably screwed if you try to. So there's a different way. Let's talk about it. Graham, welcome to the show.
yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I love that last part. 100% agree with you. And I've seen your stuff for years floating around, and you've been one of those guys, like you said, that has been championing this new economy and really just inviting people into a new opportunity. And like, I started this in 2009. I can't remember exactly when you got started, but it was the wild, wild west back then. But it's only gotten better now. There's just more opportunity. It's easier than ever. So I love that.
Yeah, maybe that's a good place to start. I got in 2000. I say got in. I mean, in 2008, I was broke and desperate enough to try something wild and crazy. Like at the time, it was affiliate marketing, and then I had an agency. I had an e-com store. I had an online direct sales business. But basically, I've been making a go as an online entrepreneur since fall of 2008, shortly before you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I was next year. You were a year ahead of me.
And there's, I think, perhaps a misconception that you just kind of alluded to, that there was like some sort of window of opportunity, that now it's too late and everything is saturated. And I would argue that it is the polar opposite of that, that when we got started, there were actually still a lot more barriers.
Yeah.
That have been basically removed. So maybe you want to talk about that. Why is it better now than ever?
I'm so glad you said that, because so few people do. Yeah, like back when we were doing this, bro, you remember how hard it was to convince someone to buy something from somebody on the internet, like that wasn't an Amazon or a Walmart.com. Like, I remember people, when I was selling my first online course, I started in the music recording space. So I was teaching people how to record music. And so when I sold my first course, I didn't even know that's what it was called, that it was a course. I was just selling videos. They were like, are these DVDs? Are you going to mail me DVDs? And I was like, no. Like, you get the downloads, and like, why would I pay you for nothing? Like something imaginary. And I'm like, it's not nothing. I'm teaching you what you needed. It was so hard for the sales copy and the nurture process. It was long and slow. These days, everybody knows what a digital product is. They understand what a course is or a video training. They've been to so many of these things that, like you said, there's no more barriers. Now it's really just, do you have an audience that you can connect with? Can you add value in the marketplace? And if anything, the rest of us have gone ahead and paved the way and proven that there's markets that are viable for you. Saturation is a great indicator that there's money to be made in that industry, and there's plenty of opportunity for everyone. It's a lot easier now than it was 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah, so it's really funny that you bring up the whole like physical versus digital shipping of goods. There's a whole like, it's at least I thought it was super humorous, or I think it's super humorous. Probably guys, I don't know. We're probably on the nerdy end of the like online business reflection spectrum and what we think is amusing. But I remember the evolution of product iconography that like when we first launched, or I say, it was like you had to have a visual to encapsulate your product, and it would have like the spread of DVDs, and it might have like a computer screen with an image on it of the product. And then like, people go, well, I never got my DVDs, or even I never got my computer. And you're like, no, those are representations because it's like, how do you represent a digital file, right? You still, and then it evolved to where people actually started to understand. And then you had to start putting in your product iconography, like a view of what it'll look like on a desktop, a view of what it'll look like on a tablet, a view of what it'll look like on a phone. And I had this one designer that I was working with through a long time. And he would tell me sort of like, this is what people expect now in how you visually represent a product as this understanding is evolving in the market. And it was like, it's just crazy to me. There were people that were having to constantly figure out how to present these products in terms of imagery in a way that didn't confuse, or that confused the market no more than necessary, let's say. It's crazy.
That's so funny. You're absolutely right, bro. Maybe they're a little too nerdy for the audience, but that's the reality. It's a lot easier now. It's a much more accepted model.
But here's the thing. It's like there's a long tail to these things. It's like if you get the product imagery wrong on your funnel, then you're creating customer service headaches of people saying, "Where's my DVDs?" You're decreasing conversions because you're not maybe aligning with their psyche and what they're expecting. Like, that's been, to me, one of the funnest parts of being a digital entrepreneur now for going on 16 years, is getting to feel like we're kind of out in front, looking back and watching the rest of the world evolve its understanding of what we're at the bleeding edge of, to where now, maybe this brings us back to the original point of like, now everybody gets it, which means now's the time.
Yes, absolutely. And really what I think maybe you would agree with this, Jeff, and it sounds like you've had a lot of different types of online businesses, but especially in the space you're in now, to me, the most important asset you could have as an online entrepreneur is an audience. Like, the audience is the asset. Without an audience, you can't do anything. But with an audience, you could do whatever you want to do, and you could sell whatever you want to sell. And so now is the time to find your people, build your audience. You don't need a big audience to make a great living, but you do need to decide who you want to serve, how you want to serve them. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't say it's too late. I'm with you. I'm pretty bullish on this space. I think we're probably at the front of a 30, 40-year wave, and it'll look different. But we're at uncharted territory. It's so new still in the scheme of the history of humans and entrepreneurship. So it's a great time to start building that audience.
So why don't we start there with building an audience? I feel like as soon as you say building an audience, and I'm sure I don't even have to ask. I already know that we're aligned, that so much of the evangelism of this opportunity is about speaking to people's limiting beliefs and or like psychology-based distortions of what it means to do certain things or what associations they make. So as soon as we say build an audience, I know from personal experience that perhaps even the majority of people's defenses go up as like, oh, well, that's not me. Can you speak a little more about what we mean by like building an audience in the modern world does not mean going like full Kim Kardashian. So can you tell us what it does mean?
Yeah, it means sharing what you know and what you love with people like you in a regular, consistent basis online. So, for example, that could be starting a blog or a YouTube channel or a podcast like this and deciding I'm going to create a weekly show or a weekly video where I decide to help people like me, or as Rory Vaden puts it beautifully, right? Like, you're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. So what is the problem you solved, or what was the crisis of belief you were at, and how have you solved it? Like, were you overweight and out of shape and you got on a health journey? For me, I had learned how to record music as an audio engineer, and all my music friends, they were super intimidated by audio engineering and equipment, and they would always come to me for advice in the real world. And that's probably a good indicator for you what business you could start. What are people coming to you for, asking for help in the real world? All we're doing when we audience build is sharing everything we know in bite-sized chunks for free, generously, accurately, on a consistent basis on a digital platform. And it's usually one to many. And in the early days, no one's going to listen or watch or read, but eventually people will find those pieces of content and they'll start to realize, hey, Jeff's helping me do this specific thing, or Graham's the person you go to when you want to learn this specific thing. And they start to come back. And then there's a lot of, there's a whole system, and you've taught this, for years, like what do you do when people are starting to engage with you? whether it's from an ad or whether it's from organic traffic. Like, how do you get them into your ecosystem? But all audience building is, in my mind, is just sharing what you know with a specific type of person, helping them solve a specific type of problem generously and consistently for years and years at a time.
Yeah. So, man, lots we could say there. First of all, why don't we talk about generously? That word, I think, is maybe counterintuitive for a lot of people that start to think through the realities of an online business, where, you know, in the physical world, excess generosity results in not having anything else left to sell because you gave it all away. That's kind of not how it works online. I suspect you know what I'm getting at. So maybe can you talk about the mindset of giving generously and consistently online?
Yeah, like when I started, and maybe this is true for you, Jeff, like I found that other content creators were very stingy. So in the music space, they did not want to share their secrets. The music producers of the day did not tell you the real truth of what they did to get that sound or make things sound good or what equipment they used. They kind of skirted around the issue. And it was these guarded secrets. So then me and friends and people and colleagues like me came along and said, well, that's silly. Let's just share all the secrets, because if we don't tell people what works and they go try it, they'll never trust us. So I decided to give everything I knew away for free in little videos every single week. And I would say, hey, here's a technique, go try it. And if it works, now they know that I have a legitimate thing to offer them. And they're like, well, what else does Graham have? And then they would want to go deeper with me. A lot of times people have literally taken my stuff and gone and built, and these days as a business coach, I've gone and built a business off of my free stuff on YouTube and come back and said, I feel really guilty because I haven't bought anything from you. Let me buy all your stuff, as a way of like tipping me, or as like just out of, you know, this reciprocity thing. And that's wonderful. But really most people, they get a taste, they want more. You can't outgive in this economy because you're sharing. You have to give more, actually, because most people don't give enough. And they're having to use bait and switch or really manipulative copy to get you to buy something. I'd rather just build trust with you. And I'd rather you test out my brain, the way I think, because maybe I'm not for you, but maybe I am. And if you test out my material, then you can come and go deeper, join my community, or buy a course that's going to have, really, people aren't buying information these days, right? They're buying curation, they're buying organization, they're buying implementation, they're buying that they just want to invest in themselves. You know what it's like, people who pay attention. And so they a lot of times people know, hey, I've consumed all of Jeff's stuff. I'm going to buy his program and I'm going to get serious. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about similar things in the program, because it's so much more well-developed and it's going to give them from point A to point Z. And there's support, there's proximity, there's a lot of other ways to add value in the digital economy. But I think you got to lead with generosity and content. Otherwise, no one's going to know who you are.
So I think you said something really pithy, that people don't pay for information anymore because basically it's all out there. They pay for, you said, curation, organization, implementation. I would probably add personalization.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you can talk a little bit more about that, because immediately I was like, yeah, but share please more on that.
Sure. What's cool is you can get really creative. Like if, let's say, I'm putting out content about how to start an online business or how to grow your online business and work fewer hours and all that kind of stuff. You could take my content and run with it and start it, but you might want to, let's say, buy my book, like my first book, How to Get Paid for What You Know. Okay, well, I might just want to have it in my hand when I'm on the beach or on a cruise or on vacation, just to have it in one physical place, because it's weird. People still want physical books these days.
Yeah.
There's something about it. So, okay, I want to get all of Graham's brain in a $25 book. Okay, I might want to see how he's building his courses and building his business through like the whole soup to nuts like course. So the course will then say, okay, start with this video. Let's figure out your business idea. Then we'll go to this, and here's a tutorial how to set it up in Kajabi or Teachable or School or whatever platform you use. Like they want to see everything, and they don't want to have to cherry pick all my random YouTube videos. So that curation is valuable. They might pay to join a community where now they can get exclusive content, yes, but also they can come on a live call with me and they can ask me questions, or they can be a part of a paid community that other people are doing the same thing they're doing, and it's not going to be some Reddit forum that's getting out of hand, because they've all paid to be there. They're all serious about the thing that they want to learn, and so they find their people, and they're getting that community and that coaching. You can go up the value chain to hire me as a coach directly. And to your point, now I'm giving you personalized feedback, personalized education. I'm not telling you do this, or this. without listening to your problems. I'm listening to where you are, Jeff, and going, oh, well, in your situation, you've got this part down. What about this? Have you considered this? And now I'm getting personalized feedback. And so it just goes all the way up. And these days, post-COVID, you could sell events. People want to be in person now more than ever. So ironically, we're digital entrepreneurs, but a lot of people are doing in-person events or meetups or conferences or masterminds because we were lonely and we want to just hang out and be in the room and meet other people. And if your brand is strong enough, doesn't have to be big, but strong enough, you can do an event, virtual or physical, and the people that would come to your event are valuable to the other people that come to the event. So now you're the curator of a space or a virtual room or a physical room with bringing cool people in. And so now they're not just coming for you, they're coming for the other attendees of this event. So you can sort of see how there's so much that's available to sell or monetize. And that's excluding what you said is how you got started with affiliate marketing. That's a huge piece of the puzzle where if people trust you, you could talk about a product you believe in and they'll go buy that product because of you and you'll get a cut of it. And it's just you being a referral for that company. And there's so much potential there as well. But it all starts with trust. And in my experience doing organic content for 15 years, the more content I have out there, the more I have an opportunity for people to see it on Google and YouTube because those are two search engines, but also for people to share it. When they're like, hey, this guy Jeff's stuff is so good, and they share your stuff, then they're going to market for you. And that becomes a powerful multiplicative effect.
Yeah, I think that it's fundamentally, there's this sort of inversion of value between information and time. What used to be most valuable was the information, and whatever time it took to get the information was worth spending. Now, all the information's out there. What's actually more valuable is to compress the amount of time that it takes to get to the right piece of information. So recognize what is your value proposition as a digital creator or purveyor of knowledge. You're actually providing a service more than you are providing the underlying information. The service is compressing the amount of time that it takes for the consumer to get to the value center of the information and how it applies to their particular situation. So broadly speaking, that's how you think about your value in this industry, is how can I constantly be making information more assimilatable for thousands or however many people in whatever way is relevant to them. Like, that's it. That's the service. And I think everybody can relate to it in that way, because I think there is this sort of bias or this fallacy that's like, oh, well, it's all the information's out there, so what value could I possibly provide?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And the other element there too, Jeff, and maybe you would attest to this, is the way you talk about the topic, the way you teach, your unique point of view. I mean, we're in a world now where it's not like, how can I get this information? It's like, who do I want to learn this from? You know, we get to pick our talking heads. And that's valuable to know as a content creator. And I think that steps into sort of what I'm even talking about in my new book, Rebel, which is all about like embracing your uniqueness. Like, the key to winning online today is be 100% you. Don't be like Jeff. Don't be like Graham. Like, let your personality come out. It will alienate some, but it will really attract the right people. And they could learn from any business coach. And if they pick me, it's probably because of my worldview, the way I think about things, the way I talk, the jokes I have, the fact that I like Star Wars, I talk about my family, like whatever it is, they're going to be attracted or repelled. And that's going to be a huge part of audience building, is you being you, and that no one can copy you.
So how do you then, like let's dig into that concept, because I think that too is where so many people, their resistance flares up, which is really their insecurity flares up. They're like, oh, well, yeah, how could I ever be the center of the value proposition? It's about me, like me, you know. How do you speak to people who just sort of, it's almost like there's an incredulity that like, well, how could the way that I speak, or the dumb jokes that I tell, or the funny way that I look, or the goofy way that I dress, like whatever the pieces of my personality equation are, how could those things be anything other than detriments to my success, when in fact they're actually probably the assets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you think about it in like ratios, I would say if you're a content creator or you're building a brand online, 80% of what you put out there should be really focused on them, the audience, the avatar you're serving, and very clearly what they're looking for. That's how they're going to find you in a Google search or YouTube search, and it's how they're going to know you have something worth clicking on or reading or listening to. Is like, hey, can Jeff solve my problem or not? And so I focus on 80% that. What I wouldn't do then is just hide behind that. I would say the other 20% of the time, or in 100% of your content, show a little bit of your personality or your bent or your opinion or, your hot take or your spiky, as Rich Lipton says, your spiky point of view. Like that, people want to know what you stand for. And the problem is if you don't, this was my mistake. When I started, I was like, don't talk about myself, just give them value, give them the answers to their questions. And I started to become vanilla. I started to blend in. I was just a guy that could tell you what to do, how to. It wasn't until people started to point out, oh, that was so funny when you said that, or I noticed on Instagram that you posted something about your family, or you went to Disney World, you did this, that's cool. Like, do you hang out with your family a lot? They were really interested in those non-related to the business things. And I had a hard time wanting to show that part of me because I'm a private person and I figured nobody cared. But the more I tested out sharing a little bit about my thoughts, my feelings, my worldview, my takes, my opinions, my jokes, not making it the star, but like that 10 to 20%, the more it really endeared people to me, the right people, and they became super fans. And I think that's in a world of social media, because again, when we started, social media wasn't really what it is now. So nowadays, this is why people follow people on Instagram or TikTok. There's something about their personality that they like. People aren't getting their news from the mainstream news sources. They're getting it from the people they like to regurgitate the news from, because they want their slight take on it. No one reads articles. They watch the YouTuber who's reading the article in real time telling you their thing. So it's a weird world we're in where it's like, maybe, just maybe, I can stand out and be valuable, not just from the 80%, which is the content and the problem solving, but also me being me and attracting my little quarter of the internet that wants to learn from me and follow me and go down this journey with me.
Yeah, one of the things you said before we actually hit record, because we were sort of both commiserating over our lives and our schedules and our energy management practices, and you said something that I think applies to me too, that we're both introverts who extrovert. And I wonder if you could maybe dig into that for the audience, because I happen to know, at least anecdotally from my events and meeting my audience, because I'm an introvert who extroverts, and whether I say that or people can just feel it, I know I have a ton of those in my audience, introverts who want certain things out of life that would require them to extrovert to some degree. And they're like, oh, but that's not me. And so then the limiting belief kicks in. It's like, oh, well, I would just need to be an extrovert in order to succeed at that. When au contraire, my experience has taught me, of a lot of the guys that kind of do stuff like we do, I actually think it's more common that we are introverts who have learned to extrovert than that we were ever naturally extroverted. Because I think, honestly, people that are naturally extroverted probably have less resistance, less of a hard time just going and thriving in a traditional job, because they go to work and they like everybody, where it's guys like us that are like, damn, I really wish I could just stay home.
Bingo, bro. That was it. I just don't want to have to be around people all the time. I think you're right. This type of model attracts a lot of introverts. But to your point, you said it so perfectly. There is a limiting belief of, I don't want to do anything live or in person, or I just want to be able to hide behind my podcast or hide behind my YouTube channel. It's interesting. It's very set up for you to hide behind your content, which is good. It can get you started and you can add value without having to interact with a person in real life, and you can make a great living. But I've had to fight through my introversion and it's easier to stay home. But some of the biggest inflection points have come from leaving the house or leaving the room virtually even, and getting into different rooms and meeting people. I'll give you an example. You're a musician. So the NAMM show is a big audio musician nerd out fest in Anaheim every year. And it's it's going to bring the audio guys that want to see the latest equipment. It's going to bring the guitar guys that want to see the latest guitars, and et cetera. And so I knew as a person in the music space when I first started my first business, that was the one place once a year that over 200,000 people from all over the world that are in the music industry come to. And for whatever reason, they come. And I remember thinking, it was 2012, I was like, I gotta go to this show and just show my face, because I had been building this brand in the digital space where I had name recognition, but I hadn't met people in real life. And I remember telling my wife, we live in Florida, I think I got to fly to California. I think I got to, pay for the flights, the hotels, rental car, and I got to walk around this giant convention center, which is my nightmare, 200,000 people from all over the world, and just walk around. I don't even have any friends that are going to go there with me. Like, I'm just going to walk around, and I just had the sense that I needed to be in the room. And I told my wife, I don't know if I have any proof that this is going to be worth my time, but I have a sense that I need to start showing my face at least once a year in some type of event like this and connect with some people. And slowly but surely, each year I went out, opportunities opened up for collaborations, for podcasts, and it was interesting how, your digital reputation precedes you. So they'll say, oh yeah, Recording Revolution, I've seen your videos on YouTube, but then now they meet me and they realize, oh, you're like a normal person. You're kind of cool. Actually, like, we had a good lunch. And hey, would you ever want to come do a thing? And that you know how that is, Jeff. Like, you have to be in the room, or whether it's join a mastermind, and like, I'm introverted and intimidated by all these awesome people in this space, but I got to be in the room to learn from certain people, to show my face. And it's like, every time I've taken those scary steps, it's always been worth it. I do go home exhausted right. And I can't do it all the time. And I do have to manage my energy, but it's like this beautiful, like, again, 10, 20% of your time, try to do that kind of connecting. 80% you can hide behind the camera as an introvert, but it is amazing how that one connection, that one person you meet, that one lunch you had can really turn into really cool opportunities for collaboration or just for friendship, because it's a lonely business where you're by yourself and it can look glamorous on the outside, but a lot of times it's lonely and you need people in your corner to keep you going.
So, I mean, first of all, yeah, I just couldn't agree more. I'm sort of chuckling internally. And I think I was really fortunate that my first exposure, I mentioned affiliate marketing, the first community that I got involved in, or platform where I started learning, it was, I think it was a little ahead of its time in the sense that it basically said, aspiring digital entrepreneurs need to get out of their house. And so they prioritize live events as part of their platform. Now, out of their own self-interest, I'm sure that live events are a great way to monetize an audience, right? They wanted us in their room, so we buy stuff. But it was amazing. It in fact, I could name probably close to half a dozen projects or businesses that have been very successful and very fun that grew out of relationships that were seeded in maybe my first 2 years of attending those live events, where then, like, years later, as I'd been doing some stuff and people I met had been doing some stuff and we were at a different place, we're like, oh, let's align the stuff we're doing and create some new stuff. And those have been like the best projects that I've done. So anyway, I think that's been really cool. Maybe can we take a step back? Like, give us a little bit of like the personal history. I mean, how did you, what was going on in 2009 that sent you careening in this direction?
Just something called the global recession. Oh, yeah. I lost 2 jobs in 10 months. My wife and I had just moved. We were in Virginia. We had just moved to Tampa, Florida, bought our first house, had our first baby, and then I lost my second job that year. And so it was like, what do? We burned through savings. And it was getting to that point of like, man, I got to find work. Am I going to go back to sitting at a cubicle wearing an oversized shirt and a goofy tie, when really my dream was to be like you? wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a professional musician. I chased that dream through college and it kind of died. I had to make a decision between having money or pursuing music, and I chose money to take care of my wife. But it's like 4 years after that, and now I've lost my job. And so the so-called secure, stable job wasn't there. And I just couldn't bring myself to go back to a job, but I didn't know anything else. And so I was sort of forced to figure out, well, if I had to make money, what would I do? And again, I wasn't entrepreneurial. I didn't know a business person, but I didn't want to go back to work. And I wanted to see if could I make a living from home. So the only thing I knew how to do was record music for bands. So I figured I'd start a freelance service. And since I was new to Tampa, I didn't know anybody locally. I figured I'd need to get some remote work online, because you can do a lot of post-production work remotely. And that led me to think, well, how are people going to find me online if I don't put something out online? So I started a blog and a YouTube channel with a thought that I would share what I was doing with my own music as a musician. And then the couple of clients I had, as like, hey, maybe this guy knows what he's doing. Maybe I could hire him to finish my record or mix or master my record. That was like all my brain could come up with. And all I knew was Google is a search engine, YouTube is a search engine. Let's just put content there and see if it creates leads for a service business. And what ended up happening was that people liked the content. They found the content. They didn't want to hire me as much as they wanted to learn from me so they could do it themselves. And they kept asking good questions. And could you do more videos? Could you do more articles? And in between gigs, I would make content for free, and to the point I had to decide, am I going to keep doing this for free or stop it and get a job or find a way to monetize this content? And I didn't know a single person doing what we were doing. I didn't know it was an industry. So I just tried to think through, like, how could I monetize, sponsorships and like banner ads on your website and whatever. And then eventually stumbled into a digital course. I was like, well, maybe I could sell videos. People like my videos on YouTube. Maybe I could sell a 3-hour long training teaching this piece of software in the studio called Pro Tools. And that was what got me started. When people bought a zip file off of PayPal for $45 that I was selling horribly, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm awful at this, but I could get better and I could do more of this. And I like, the light bulb went off, and that was early 2010 for me. And that's when I just started, like, I've got to figure this out and see if I can just make a little bit of money. And dude, it's been a wild ride ever since.
So tell me your PayPal horror story. I know that every one of us has one.
So, I mean, the big thing with PayPal, right, is like they can just hold your money.
See, I knew you had one. Everybody that's been doing this more than a few years has a PayPal horror story. All right. Sorry. Yeah, please tell me more.
Oh, well, just like, you do that launch, you're like, it's working, it's so easy. Then all of a sudden, like, you get a lot of money. For me, it was like a lot of money, probably like $10,000 or something comes in, and they're like, we're going to hold this. This seems fraudulent. We're not really sure what's going on. I'm like, hold what? Like, this is my money.
Yeah.
And that's when you realize that you're not in control when they're the middleman. But dude, yeah, that was a nightmare. I'm not on PayPal anymore, but that's how I got started, was just an iWeb website on my Mac and a PayPal button. And I was like, maybe we can slap something together and make this work.
Well, I actually tell an anecdote in my book, but I mean, yeah, that $10,000 threshold is when PayPal decides to look under the rock that you are under and decide and usually they decide they don't like it until over the next 6 months of them holding your money, you can hopefully convince them to at least release it. Yeah. So online merchants, now you know how I feel about PayPal. And I don't think it's actually gotten any better, sadly, unless you're on eBay, because then you're in their walled garden.
Sure.
Okay. But yeah, but one of those things that we could nerd out on for hours, probably swapping PayPal and Stripe horror stories. But okay. So that was 2009. Initial monetization, you went to creating a course on, you probably didn't know it at the time, but you officially entered into the knowledge business, or knowledge commerce, as they refer to it. I'm just going to say something. I've kind of been waiting, like, when am I going to say this? And I'm just going to say it. I feel like the world is still so frustratingly confused about the kind of stuff that we do. And I'll give you I'll explain what I mean. So I'm looking at your bio that your team sent over, hey, Graham's coming on the podcast. Here's a get to know him document. And it's got a thumbnail, a screenshot of you on a CNBC show with Contessa Brewer. And I'm looking at the headline, or the little the subheadline of your being on their show. And it says, how a YouTuber makes $1.6 million working 5 hours a week. Here's what frustrates me about that. It's like the world is only interested sometimes in talking about digital entrepreneurship unless they can have this, what to the ordinary person is a seemingly ridiculous correlation between some dollar amount that's big and some investment of time that's small. That's like what everybody's like online, being a digital entrepreneur, the way that we present it to the world, the way it gets presented to the world is that it's about making more by working less. And they complete it. And does that frustrate you? Because it totally frustrates me, because it's not actually the point. The point is you can do your passion, or you can feel more fulfilled, or you can be working with the kind of people that you want to build relationships with, or you can be producing more value than you take out of the economy, not the other way around. It's not about getting more by doing less. It's about getting more by giving even more. And like, there's a whole like legitimate wondrousness to this that I feel like they neglect in the conversation just to make it sound like a gimmick. And it kind of pisses me off, because I think counterintuitively, they end up repelling people from taking the shot.
No, that's a very interesting take. And I don't disagree. I think I think two things. I think one, you're right. It is a shallow take that's missing all the other benefits of why you'd start this business. The reason you and I got into this is like, I want to do work I'm passionate about. Like you said, I want to work from home. I want to be able to sort of own my terms and like not have to do stuff that's meaningless. Like I want to believe in the thing I'm doing every day. We're both musicians, so it's like a musician wants to create. I just want to go create cool stuff and do it with cool people. That's why I'm always confused about people who want to retire early. I'm like, you're just in the wrong line of work. Like you just find something you don't want to retire from. Like contribute until the day you die. And you probably want your kids to do the same thing, be of service and enjoy it. On the flip side, from my perspective, Jeff, and maybe you tell me if you've seen this too, because you've been in the space, you know all the people there. I think there's a toxic workaholism. They don't call it that; they call it hustle. But there's a toxic workaholism of like, hey, it's a badge of honor of how much I work, and I'm going to work harder than anybody else. And I like hard work as a concept, but the number of hours it can get a little out of hand. Where the advice is just, hey, push harder, work longer hours. Sacrifice. And I'm like, maybe to a point, but at what cost? And so what happens is you have people who build a business and then they become a slave to it because it demands so much of them. And then they resent the business. Their family resents the business. And I think they've missed out on a huge opportunity, which is this type of business model can give you all of the things. You get to do work you love. You get to do it with people you love. And then you can work as much or as little as you want because so much of what we do can be leveraged. It can be automated. It's digital. Fulfillment is easier. And so you have the freedom to design the business the way you want. You don't have to do it the same way everybody does it. And so I'm a big advocate of not working more than you need to so that you can like run the business efficiently so you can do the parts of it you want to do. So for example, writing books. I never thought I would get into books to make money, but I was like, I really want to write. And that's going to take time. So thankfully I have a business that doesn't take me very many hours to keep running. So I can now sit and write a book and it can do what it does. Or if I can go speak and it doesn't matter how much I make or don't make, or I can go to an event and I don't have to worry about an outcome. I just might want to go, but because I have the freedom. And to me, it's all related, but is it really my business? Technically not, because the business is running whether I do that or not, but it's the flexibility and the choice. And then for me, lifestyle of being able to take my kids to school, pick them up, take Fridays off with my wife every Friday, like not work in the evenings. These are important things to me. And maybe to some people they aren't, but I do think it's like a both and.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I mean, obviously I benefit on the daily from all the efficiencies and of the digital economy, the fact that we live in a wirelessly connected world. I just think I really have sort of an ideological strong viewpoint that you kind of never get a second chance to make a first impression with people. I think it's like, you know how they say like, you know, don't, if you're looking to find, there's certain types of places you go if you're looking for a serious relationship. There's other types of places you go if you're looking for a one night stand. If you meet someone in the one night stand environment and then later try to convert it into a serious relationship, it's like you've always got the residue of like what it was in the beginning. That might be a very weird way of analogy to draw. But I feel like a lot of times when I meet people around this digital entrepreneurial concept, I might even overcorrect and be like, hell no, it's not easy. It's brutal. Like you're going to be bloodied and battered, but you'll be free. As opposed, if perhaps only to stand out against the message that, oh yeah, it's easy. It's you just sit at home and tap buttons and make money, you know, which I think is how it gets presented sometimes. But yeah, maybe that's just my particular axe to grind.
Well, I love that for two reasons, because one, you're operating out of truth and authenticity, which is what you should do. Like that's how you serve people. Like that's how you feel. You should tell them how you feel. And like, hey, I've gone before you. I know what I'm talking about. I want to just give you the truth and not paint it as a rosy picture, too rosy of a picture. And then two, it's nice and provocative and it's what allows you to stand out when you have a bold take. If you don't have a bold take, like people aren't going to pay attention. And that's a little meta lesson, right, in content that you're so good at is you talk about what's possible, but your stance is like, dude, it's going to be hard. You got to really want it. You got to fight for it. And I think you're 100% right. I think there's two lies being sold online. I think one is that it's super easy to stay at home and just eat burritos and tap on your keyboard and money comes in. The other lie is that like you have to work around the clock. And like the only way this works is if you work around the clock, because that's not what they're not going to sign up for that either. It's like, why do I want that? I was already working around the clock, working 2 jobs to pay the bills. So to me, I just think there's a weird subculture. I push back on the other, which is the people that say work all the time, because you'll see, and I won't name names necessarily, but there's the big people that are like, they wear it as a badge of honor. And I think it's just like a weird thing they have internally to justify the amount of money they make, or I don't know what it is. But even the CEOs of major companies, like you got the CEO of Apple saying like, I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and I work the longest hours. Like, bro, nobody cares. Like you're wealthy. You've done a great job running the company. You've made a lot of money for your shareholders. Like you don't have to brag about how little you sleep and how much you work, unless there was some guilt complex or justification. And we have a culture that justifies and loves and adores overwork. And so my hot take is that's the problem. We need to fight back on that too.
Yeah. So let's turn up the heat on the combined take here. Is that I actually think that even making the conversation about time, whether it's how little it requires or how much it requires, is actually allowing the world and the worldly conversation to actually get us focused on the wrong aspects of this kind of work. There are times when it seems I feel like I'm having to work all the time, and then there is other times when I can take a month and hardly work, and it ebbs and flows. To me, it's actually there's a completely different kind of difficulty to this work, and it's actually the internal work. It's the internal work of developing myself, developing my message, developing my ability to clearly, confidently, convincingly articulate that message, and have the underlying belief that I'm worthy of the attention and time of others that I'm asking for. It's the recognition that by stepping into the entrepreneurial arena versus the employment arena, I'm on a field where there's actually no participation trophies. You're either great or you're irrelevant. And there's no paycheck for being in the middle. I mean, those are all the actual real challenges that you take on in this world. And the thing I like about those challenges is they're more aligned. There's more nobility in those sacrifices because they also involve developing myself, as opposed to the sacrifice of spending 3 hours a day commuting to and from a job that I hate, which is a different type of sacrifice, but there's just not the same nobility in that sacrifice because it's not inherently drawing out my greatness to make that trade. Whereas these sacrifices do, and that's why they're better. It's not because they take more or less time. We're making it about the wrong thing. We're letting the world make it about its thing instead of what this really is.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, dude, amen. I'll just slow clap you silently for that. I mean, that's 100% true. That's what's so hard about this work. And there's hardly any preparation for it because you don't know what you're getting into until you do it. You don't know the limiting beliefs. You don't know the self-doubt, the insecurities that never had to come to the surface. And for me, you said it perfectly. Am I worthy to be in this space? There's like this, am I enough? Am I the right person? And even if you've had success, it doesn't go away because it just shifts. Like, am I worthy to keep the success? Have I become irrelevant? Is there someone else that's come along that's doing a better job than me? And there's this tension of like, how do I stay relevant and pivot and evolve while also staying true to myself? And I think it's so messy. Like, it's so much messier than you can even convey. People don't even want to know how messy it is. They just want to know how it works. But if you try to talk about the messiness of it, people are like, I don't get it. Because in a way, they won't get it until they jump in. It's like trying to explain how water feels and how treading water is exhausting and how you can't breathe underwater. They don't get it if they've never been in water. It's like when people who get married or they're engaged and they go to premarital counseling, like it's really hard to give good, like they're like, oh, it's going to be fine. They're tuning out everything the counselor is saying or the therapist is saying because they've never been married yet. And so it's not going to make any sense until they're 6 months in and they're fighting. And so there's this reality of you can't really prepare for it. But I love what you said about it. It demands the greatness to come out of you. Being an entrepreneur, especially online, has been the number one thing for my personal development, which has made me feel both weak and strong. Weak in that it's revealed my weaknesses, which makes me feel uncomfortable. but then strong because I've had to deal with them and figure out, okay, wow, I didn't realize that was there, or I thought like that, or I reacted this way, because when I worked a job, it just never had a reason to come up to the surface. So I think that's a whole book right there. You could talk about it, about sort of these phantom benefits of jumping into the arena of entrepreneurship that come along just by default. I mean, it's hard, but by default.
Hey there, it's Jeff. So real quick, I want to let you know about my text message community. I use text messages to provide unique value to the Unlock Your Potential community. These texts could just be random thoughts. It could be letting you be the first to know about an event I'm planning, maybe giving an update on a special I'm running or some free training that I host for my community. Anyway, just shoot me a text to get subscribed to the list. The number is 702-996-3926. Again, that is 702-996-3926. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. So speaking of writing books, you've got this new book, Rebel, Find Yourself by Not Following the Crowd. When was that published?
It comes out September 3rd. So as we're talking, we're a couple weeks out. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So when this comes out, this episode will be right there approximate to the launch of that book. I love anything about not following the crowd. I tend to vibe with. So maybe tell me a little bit more about that book. What was the source energy that it grew out of? Why'd you commit to doing what it takes to write and publish a book? And what's kind of the big thesis?
Yeah, so it came out of a day with hanging out with John Gordon, great author and speaker and
I know
his own right. And I was hanging with John, and I was really trying to like pick his brain about being a world-class speaker. I was like, all right, bro, I want to do more speaking. I'm a musician. I miss being on stages. I'm hiding in my digital cave, and I want to get back out there, and I'm doing it, but I want to learn from you. So like, tell me what I need to know about speaking and all that stuff. And he said, well, let me ask you, what's the message of your next book? Because I just published my first book, which was all about the business model. It was a very natural book that the publisher wanted to do. And I was like, bro, I just wrote a book. Like, I have no idea what the second book is. Like, I'm just trying to enjoy that. I'm proud of this thing getting out there. And he was like, well, this is really important. What is the message of the next book? I think we need to start there. And we sat around for 2 hours riffing on like things I could write about, what I want to write about. And I wasn't landing anywhere. He finally said, well, tell me your life story. So I walked him through like my journey of like, well, I wanted to be a rock star. I remember my guidance counselor like sitting me down in high school, a senior year, saying like, you're the only kid in your class who hasn't applied for college. We're a college prep school. We have a 100% college acceptance rate. Like, you have to apply to a school, otherwise you break our streak. And I don't care what you do with your life, but this is what you're going to do. And I was like, well, screw this. This is ridiculous. Like, that's when I realized that like adults weren't really for me, and I didn't want to go to college. And then even when I lost my job, I didn't want to get another job. And my family were like, well, you should apply for another job and protect your family, take care of your family. I was like, I don't know. I think I want to start a business. And I was just telling him my story. And John goes, bro, you don't do what people tell you to do you? You're a rebel. And it was like a weird word for me to hear, because it's not a word I would have associated with. Most people might have a negative association with that word. But at the same time, the moment he said that, it was like one word that summed up how I felt about my whole life without realizing it, which was, I'm not trying to be like rebellious for the sake of being different or breaking against tradition. I just don't feel like I'm like everybody else. And I've always felt like I've had a sense of, well, everyone's doing this and going this way. I don't like where that ends up. Do I really want to go that same path? Am I crazy to want to go a different path? And so when we had this conversation, I was like, bro, there's something here about this book. And like within minutes, I had all these ideas. He was like, you need to pitch this to your publisher. So I pitched it 2 days later. They signed it 6 days later. And they're like, when can the manuscript be in? And I was like, bro, I have no idea what this book is about. So it was an interesting journey of like, I knew what it was about conceptually. I knew my story and what I've done to like embrace being uniquely me. But it was like coming up with the right framework. If I was going to teach somebody else how to do this, that was part of the journey for me, was figuring that out, to put that into words and then writing the book. And so the premise is pretty simple. I think life is frustrating and disappointing largely because we're living out of alignment with our design. We're designed a certain way. It's really hard to fight your design. But we're looking around at what everyone else is doing, how you do work, how you do marriage, how you do family, how you do money. We're trying to find a lane, and everyone wants you to be like them. And so you just kind of play along until you realize, I don't think this is me. What do you do? And so the book is about giving you the permission to step into your uniqueness, because that's my premise, is that at the center of success, satisfaction in life, which is not the same as success, by the way. You can be successful and not satisfied, as I'm sure a lot of people have figured out. Success, satisfaction, and service, like the 3 S's that we all want in life. We want to be of service to people. We want to be successful. We want to be satisfied. My premise is the white hot center of that is embracing your uniqueness, 100% being you. And that's going to lead to more success, satisfaction, and you'll be of more service to people. And so the book is on a journey through a 5-part framework to help you do the inner work to find yourself, as I put it in the subtitle.
I think it's so, first of all, if we had more time, I wish we had more time, we would geek out on all the overlap and alignment between what you said and not just what I agree with, but what I feel like I spend my life stumping for out in the world. I always sort of try to explain it as like, do you eat your soup with a fork, or do you eat your soup with a spoon? Like there's an intention implicit in the design of things. And if you're unhappy, you're probably a fork that's being used to eat soup. And that's because you're not doing what you're designed for, right? It's called teleology, right? So much alignment with what you just said. But I think that I really, I want to maybe in our last bit of time here, get into this more of like this uniqueness at the center. Because I feel like the world today is so fixated on identity. Mm-hmm. And yet, and people are so hungry to define and focus on and be respected in terms of their identity. And all that we seem to be doing is trying to amalgamate different group definitions into some implied definition of self based on the overlap of the Venn diagram of all the different group identities that we feel like coalesce into us. And I actually think that that is such a pernicious and destructive way to try to figure out who we are, instead of to literally like with celebration and vigor and to insistently declare, I am a category of one, period. Let me tell you what's in that category. And like, I think that, I swear the world is so like devious in how it distracts us, because I feel like as soon as people hear you say, oh, I need to get really clear on who I am and my unique, authentic value proposition to the world, immediately, if we don't sort of head this off at the pass, we'll go to, oh, okay, great. Let me build this identity out of all the existing definitions in the world. Because again, our limiting belief is, well, surely there couldn't actually be something unique and valuable about just me, separate from my association with other pre-existing groups, so to speak.
Yeah, so well said. We're going about identity the wrong way. We're looking at what group do I fit in? Yeah. What label that already exists. It's just like, which club do I join in high school or college? Like, that's not what identity is. Again, that's literally the opposite. You can't find your identity by joining a group or like labeling yourself with other people. Like, there are parts of your identity, parts of your life that like, well, I have different roles and different hats that I wear. Okay, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm this, like, but that's not what we're talking about. To your point, like it's so well said, is, so my worldview, I'm a person of faith, so I believe that we have value and worth because we're made in the image and likeness of God. So every human life has value, and it's sad when we say like these certain people have value and these people don't have value. Everyone has value, just by the nature of being made in the image and likeness of God. That's my worldview. But then like, okay, what specifically? Well, I think, and part of what I talk about in the book is you can't look at labels, that's outside. You have to look internally at, what do I dream about? What do I care about? What lights me up? Like, what gets me out of bed, big or small? Like, we do an exercise in the book on dreams. We do an exercise on vision, and like terms of like where I want to be in 3 years, like with the reverse, like it's been the best 3 years of my life exercise. Like you're trying to get some data on yourself about, if I'm being totally honest and feeling free with myself, no one else is going to see this or judge this, you're not doing this in a group. What do I want out of life, big or small? And sometimes the small things are the most powerful things to discover about yourself, because you're getting data on yourself. And it's not necessarily to, okay, now I have a bucket list of dreams to go fulfill. It's more to better become familiar with who you are, who you've always been. My premise is that like you don't have to become you. Like, you are already you. You've been you since you were born. You just have lost track of who you are, kind of like Peter Pan in the movie Hook, right? Like he is Peter Pan. Robin Williams was Peter Pan. He just forgot who he was. And so I think a lot of us have forgotten who we were made to be, and we have to get back in touch with that. And to your point, you've said it throughout the show, there's a lot of limiting beliefs. There's a lot of stories we tell ourselves. Part of the book, I walk you through an inner story audit, because like I believe everyone has an intuitive inner voice, a still small voice that wants to guide you. You can't hear that voice with that loud internal narrative of like, am I worthy? I'm not good enough. What will people think? Like, the economy is too bad or whatever it is. So we try to identify those things. You can't even change your life if you're still listening to that story. So it's a lot of like, again, forget labels. We're not going to try to find which group do I best fit in. It's not even like picking a business model that's the best fit for me. Those are all external. And to your point, identity, that word has been hijacked by your sex, your gender, your race, your religion, your culture, where you live, who you vote for. Like that's not identity, right? Identity is who was I made to be. And the benefit of doing this work is not even just for you. It really, and I posit at the end of the book, the benefit of becoming a rebel and finding yourself is so that you can show up fully as yourself for the people in your sphere of influence, your family, your friends, your clients, your customers. You can actually better serve people when you give them your full self, your true self, not the fake self, the self that you think is going to be accepted by people. But it's risky because not everyone's going to like it, and they're going to say, you need to be more like us. In this world that celebrates quote unquote diversity, we really don't. We want everyone to think the same, act the same, be the same. And the moment you do something different, you get called out. And it is scary. It's scary to do it, but it's important if you want to live fully aligned and not like hate yourself and have the most impact you could have.
Yeah, as you were saying that, and you were sort of talking through the list of identities, I had a thought come to mind. I'm just going to say out loud because I think it might become a thing I say now. Is like, those aren't identities; those are camouflage. And there's so many things that people are like cloaking themselves in to go, this is my identity. And instead, what's happening is you just did the opposite. We can't see you anymore. All we see is this camouflage that you're so insistent about, like, look at me, that by definition, based on its origin, blends you in with millions of other people that are wearing the same camouflage.
Bingo. It's like wearing a branded shirt, a branded t-shirt, and you're like, I'm associated with this brand. And it's like, okay, well, you're that brand. You're not you anymore. Like, you're all about that brand. You chose the brand you want to be associated with. That's not what we're talking about. And that won't really help you.
Well, I'm really glad I asked about the book because based on the way you described it, I'm going to go read it. Do you have an audiobook version of it?
It will be coming out. Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I realize I'm speaking in future tense here. I'm actually thinking about maybe that this almost might be required reading for some subset of the world that I serve, because it sounds like you've written a book about what I think is at the heart of the lock on so many people's potential. It's just first a belief followed by a methodology for bringing my true essence out to the surface as the foundation to then be able to go launch products or services or whatever. But it's like people try to skip that step. They try to get right to the how-to course without the who from course.
So well said. Somebody told me, Graham, because I only have 2 books so far. You've written them out of order. You wrote the how-to with the business first and then the who from. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's the way if the cards fell. But yes, 100%, bro. I agree. And I think that my hope, right, is that like I'm taking entrepreneurial people because that's my camp, but it's really for all people. But my hope is that they get where I'm going, like they can see the value in this work because it's not as tactical and like make more money. It's really about your life. But I see the power, you see the power. That's why I was excited to come on your show because you have a big heart for fulfillment. And what is fulfillment? To me, fulfillment doesn't come from, chasing and following the crowd. It comes from finding yourself. And it really comes from doing that inner work. And it's refreshing.
Do you know what the word means? Fulfillment in terms of its etymology?
No, but I guess you're going to tell me.
The Old English fulfillon, which has variations in its definition, but it basically sources from the Old English word for prophecy or destiny. Wow. So to your point, we're created. It's that we don't get to decide what fulfills us. It's just any more than a fork gets to decide that it wants to be for soup.
Yeah,
it's already
That's so good. I love that.
Well, man, I wish we had more time, but good news though. I'm going to be on your show tomorrow.
Yeah.
So we do have
part 2.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, hey, any parting thoughts? Obviously, let the audience know how they can go get more of you. Obviously, your book, Rebel, that's going to be out around the time of this episode, but where else?
Yeah, so with a book real quick, if they want, therebelbook.com, depending on when this comes out, you can get pre-order bonuses and they might still be up as well. So wherever you bought the book, take your receipt there and get all the bonuses. And then, the Graham Cochrane Show podcast or YouTube, grahamcochrane.com is where a lot of things live, or on Instagram. Probably the only place I hang out online is at the Graham Cochrane.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to tomorrow and really grateful you spent this time here.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Of course. And to all you viewers and listeners out there, you are the best part of this show, why we do it. Can't wait to serve you again next time. Take care.
If you loved that episode, then you're definitely going to love this one. Check it out.
Love-based leadership for me, it emerged organically because as I became an entrepreneur and I started to learn about professional culture, for me grew out of an attempt to try to create the culture in an organization that I would even want to be a part of.
I hope you're open for a little bit of reverse interviewing here.
Please.
It's going to be super fun.